I crawled away, beguiling, and I love it, I love it, I love it.
Yes, Cary Grant, what a guy. I'm a huge fan of his movies and actually a huge fan of his life and what he did with his life. I think he's very well known for being the master of invention or reinvention. You know, he came from very humble beginnings in Bristol in the UK and ended up being this huge transatlantic movie star, and I just found it such an inspiration. So I just started watching his movies, and the more I watched, the more I wanted to watch. And I just found the stories, you know, so engaging and so simple. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, without CGI, without special effects, I think the most sophisticated they got was split screen, which we're doing here. But before I knew it, I found myself writing about these characters. And then those characters and those stories actually morphed into my own life, and I found that the more I thought about it, the more it related to what we are going through now in so many ways, about identity, about suspicion, about truth. And you know, although the jumping off point was these movies, I found myself completely immersed in something that's now at the centre of our lives today. Yes, In Name Only, which is an early, I think late 30s film with Cary Grant and Carole Lombard and Kay Francis. And I'm kind of writing it from the perspective of the villain, I think, of the piece. So Cary Grant being married to Kay Francis, they have this marriage, and she entered into it really for status and for lifestyle and for money. He then meets someone else who he genuinely loves, and his wife's world falls apart because this isn't what she was bargaining for. She thought she had her life set, and it's really kind of writing it from that perspective, and I found it so interesting because it made me start thinking about, well, you know, how do people enter into relationships? What is the motivation? You don't truly know what the other person is thinking, and there's so many different reasons, not just romantic relationships, but in general, you know, why is this person in this relationship?
Hello, my friend, you're quite a boy. Have we met before? Well, never mind, but why the sudden interest tonight?
Yes, absolutely. The title of the album, When I Don't Love You, I'll Let You Know, is taken from the Hitchcock thriller Notorious, starring Cary Grant and Ingrid Bergman. And the two of them are having an affair, which, you know, is inappropriate. The movie's set in the world of espionage. He's working for the government, they've recruited her as a spy. But they do fall in love, but she says to him at one point, you know, this is a funny kind of love affair. You know, I'm madly in love with you, but you don't love me. Because he doesn't want to admit to her, or really to himself, that he has fallen in love with her. And when she says that to him, he replies with, well, when I don't love you, I'll let you know. He doesn't tell her he loves her, but he says he'll let her know when he doesn't. And I just found that such a great line. I think Cary Grant's performance in it is amazing. His performance is so still and so understated and yet so effective. I think he's very well known for his comedic roles and his comic timing. But this performance, you know, I think really shows he's not just a movie star. I think it shows what a great actor he is. And the song In Your Heart references this movie. It really is sort of the centerpiece for me. Plus we get Claude Rains as well, who is another guy who reinvented himself again from very humble beginnings in London and ended up, you know, a great movie star. It's hugely inspiring. Yes, the other nods to Hitchcock, there's a couple of tracks on there. One is Hard to Bear, which is very much inspired by the movie Suspicion with Cary Grant and Joan Fontaine. Again, talking a lot about identity and who is this person. It's fascinating because I think today, especially with online presence with social media, I think people question all the time, you know, do I really know this person? Who is this person? How much do I really know about them? And I think that's the whole centre of Suspicion. You know, his wife doesn't know whether to believe that, you know, essentially is he a goodie or a baddie? But the whole story, it really keeps you on your toes. You don't quite know what's going on, and I thought, you know, how many times do we hear now, you know, that people aren't quite who they say they are or who they appear to be, and you know, it's very telling. And the other one is North by Northwest, very much influenced the track called What If. Fantastic, very, very famous movie, of course. I love the setting, I love the whole, you know, Grand Central United Nations in New York, which is very dear to me. I live in New York and in London. So, you know, and the whole romance of the train journey, the mistaken identity again. So much a theme, really. Plus we get James Mason, which is another bonus, another fantastic actor, and what a great voice. One that always gets a huge response is a track called It Was No One's Fault But Mine, I Must Confess. Another long title. Inspired by the movie An Affair to Remember. Again, hugely famous. I think held up quite rightly as one of the great romances with Cary Grant and Deborah Carr. And again, a beautiful setting, the Empire State Building, you know, New York. And again, misunderstandings, maybe not mistaken identity, but what's really going on with this person? You know, why haven't they come to the place they said they would be? You know, what's happened? Well, I can only assume what's happened, and of course our assumptions are wrong. And how many times do we wonder, you know, why somebody has done something or why somebody hasn't done something? And it just translated to me as well. But the whole kind of hook of that song is, you know, I could never love you less, despite everything. And the other one that's very upbeat is La La Love, which is inspired by a comedy film called The Awful Truth that Cary Grant did with Irene Dunne, who in my opinion was his best comedic partner. I think they had terrific chemistry. It's such a funny film, and plus we have a wonderful performance by Mr. Smith the dog. We're very much a change in tone, actually. People have said to me a lot, oh, this is very, very different, it's sinister even, which is the track called Cloak and Dagger, which is inspired by Indiscreet, where Cary is paired again with Ingrid Bergman. And guess what? There's suspicion and there's identity questions, because I guess the age-old trope is that a gentleman says he's single when in fact he's married, and the twist here is that he says he's married when in fact he's single. And the reason he's saying that is because he doesn't really want to get involved in a serious relationship, so he thinks, you know, if I tell these women I'm married, they'll understand that it can't go anywhere. Again, such an interesting thing, I think, for our times. How well do we know?